Hey there, guys. Hope you're doing well and you've had a fun week. So, here we are again. Time for another Bible lesson. And we are up to the letter J. But before we get started, we have to review because that's how we learn, that's how we remember. Got myself in the face. Easy, Jade. All right, so just to recap our Bible ABCs, we started A with Aaron, Moses' brother, B for Bible, 66 books in the Bible, that's true. 39 in the Old, 27 in the New. Heyo! Then we talked C for Christ, another name for Jesus. D for David, using the slingshot and the 5 little stones to get Goliath. But we also talked about his character and what made him a man after God's own heart. E was for eyes. Jesus did a miracle, helped the blind man see by spitting in some mud and putting it on his eyes. And then F was for 40. Old Testament 40 was 40 days of rain for Noah. New Testament 40 was 40 days of fasting before Jesus was tempted by the devil. G was for Galilee, and that's where we talked about how Jesus was able to calm the storm on the Sea of Galilee. And so his apostles were pretty amazed that not only could he do miracles on people, but he could also control the weather. And then we started a road. Oh no, I dropped some papers. It's getting messy around here. Then we did H for Hannah. We talked about how Hannah wanted a son and how she was so prayerful about it. And God blessed her with Samuel and how she fulfilled her promise to God and had him raised in the temple with Eli. And then last week we were up to I and we talked about idols and what idols are. And also we had an Old Testament story of King Josiah and how he destroyed idols. But then we also talked about what idols might look like for us today. And I shared one of my favorite things with you guys, my Vuvuzuela. And so that brings us up to the letter J this week. So how lucky are we that the Bible has so many wonderful stories that involve people, things with the letter J. So it was really a tough decision this week. Do we go with Jacob? Do we go with Jonah, Job? We've already did, Jesus when we talked about Christ. So we're going to do something. We're going to pick a person again this week for J. And so the person I'm going to talk about with you guys for the next little bit, somebody you probably already know. You probably know a great deal of information about him, but he is one of my favorites. So I'm excited to talk about him with you, and it is Joseph. Oh, did you guess it? Okay. Are you thinking dad, Jesus' dad Joseph, or Old Testament, coat of many colors Joseph? Yeah, it's going to be coat of many colors Joseph. Good. All right. So set the scene. Joseph's story comes to us from Genesis. The verses that talk about him start actually in Genesis 37, and they carry to the end of Genesis, which is chapter 50, and then Exodus starts. So there's a huge chunk of a Bible of verses devoted to Joseph, which is really cool because that gives us so much fun information about his life. And so one way that I thought might be really fun for us to talk about him is to talk about the different phases of his life, but particularly the different clothing he wore or might have worn during these different phases. So I thought it might be fun to kind of zhuzh it up a little. So the first one we're going to talk about is, probably know this already, his coat of many colors. Ooh la la. So he received this coat from his father Jacob. Now Joseph, you guys probably know, had 11 brothers, and he was the favorite brother, so he got this really cool coat. And of course that made his other brothers jealous. And Joseph had also was given a talent of interpreting dreams, and so he told his brothers and his father that he had these dreams where one of them had hay, and the hay, his bale of hay was in the middle, and all the other bales of hay were bowing to him. And so his family was like, oh, that's okay. Well, all right, Joseph. They were kind of not offended a little bit, but they were like, that sounds like you're better than us. So they didn't like it too much. Well, his brothers decided they wanted to get rid of him, so they throw him in a pit. They throw him in a cistern. Forgot to show you guys this. That's last week's lesson. I didn't turn the page. My life. All right. This is this week's lesson. So here's Joseph in his coat and some of his brothers in the background, Naphtali, Issachar, Asher, Dan, Zebulun, Gad. I could be any of them. But anyway, throw Joseph in the cistern, and then they hear some Ishmaelites going by, and they actually sell him into slavery. So I thought it's really cool to think about when Joseph had this coat of many colors. He was at home, he was with his family, but his brothers end up tearing it up, dipping it in goat blood, and then giving it to their father and saying, "Oh, he's dead. He died," even though they know that they sold him into slavery. So this particular outfit or piece of clothing he wore when he was at home. He was probably pretty happy there, probably well fed, enjoyed himself. But now the next part of his life, he's sold into slavery. So this is something that happens to him, right? He doesn't get a choice to do it, and so yeah, he is shipped off. He's in a caravan, heads to Egypt. Now, when he gets to Egypt, the Bible tells us that he was sold to Potiphar. And Potiphar was the head of the guard for Pharaoh. So Joseph doesn't go to just anybody in Egypt. He goes to someone who's pretty prominent. And so while he's in Potiphar's house, he's accused of a crime that he doesn't commit, and he's thrown in prison. He's thrown in jail. And so now yet again, something is happening to Joseph that he didn't plan on. It's just other people around him are kind of crafting his situation. And so now he's in jail. And so this kind of stinks, right? So first his brother sold him off. Now he's in jail. This guy cannot get a break, right? And so I want to take a second and think about what his clothes might have been like at this time. So this is going to be a far cry from the clothes that he had when he was back home with his beautiful coat. So probably a little dingy when he was in jail, maybe some holes and some patches and things like that. So certainly nothing extravagant. So to go from being the favored son and this cool coat that nobody else had to these rags, probably. It's looking pretty sad for Joseph, right? But God was still with him, same way he was when he was sold into slavery. God didn't have him go to just anybody. He had him go to Potiphar. And right now you might be thinking like, oh, that didn't really work out for him. He ended up in jail. Hang on, it's gonna work out. So while he was in jail, though, he was able to meet up with two other people from Pharaoh's court who were also in jail. One of them was a cupbearer, and another one was a baker. And he still had his talent for interpreting dreams. So even though he really doesn't have anything else to his name, doesn't have like a cool car, I didn't have cars back then. He didn't have a cool chariot. It doesn't have a lot of livestock or anything like that. Doesn't have a cool coat. He's still able to interpret dreams. He's still able to use the talent that God gave him. And so for the cupbearer, he says he interprets his dream for him because they're all in jail together. And he interprets his dream, and he says, when you get back to Pharaoh, please remember me and let him know that I'm here because I shouldn't be here and I really want to get out. So, the cupbearer ends up leaving prison, and he's reinstated into Pharaoh's court. And you might think that the cupbearer keeps his word and tells Pharaoh. He does. 2 years later. So Joseph still has to wait in jail for 2 more years. And then what happens is Pharaoh has a dream. And then the cupbearer was like, oh yeah, there was this guy. I'm remembering now. He's in jail, but he can interpret your dream. So let's go get him. So they go get Joseph out of jail, bring him in front of Pharaoh. And of course, through God, Joseph is able to interpret the Pharaoh's dream. And this is a pretty important one because what it boils down to is that there's going to be big famine in the land. And so it's going to be important that before that happens, you kind of keep a little bit of your crop safe so that when there is a famine, you can eat the extra that you have in your stores, in your reserves. And then Joseph says, you're going to need somebody to oversee this whole operation and make sure it happens. And of course, Pharaoh is like, well, you interpreted the dream. I think you're the perfect person for it. There's only going to be one person higher than you here in Egypt, and that's me because I'm Pharaoh. But other than that, you're in charge. So this is an incredible change of events for Joseph. Because again, sold into slavery in the cistern with his brothers. He was accused of a crime that he didn't commit, and then now he's getting to be one of the highest positions just under Pharaoh in the whole land of Egypt. So again, even though this kind of bad stuff happened to him, he had some wonky situations, God was with him the whole time and was really weaving this story so that these things could come to pass. So, and again, Joseph taking on this big job is going to mean a new outfit, some new clothes. So I was picturing him wearing, something very regal, very royal. The Bible tells us that he gets a robe on him, I believe. So just picture, where he was with his last bit of clothing when he was in jail, all raggedy and gross. This is a big change. This is a lot nicer, much cooler to be in the palace. So this is good. Joseph is in charge, and now here's where everything kind of comes full circle, right? So the famine happens, and Joseph's brothers are starving, and their father says, you guys got to go to Egypt and see if they have any food. And of course, the guys go, and they have all their bags and things, and they step right in front of Joseph, and they don't recognize him. But boy, howdy, he recognizes them. So here's his chance, right? You guys are probably thinking what I was thinking when I was little. Joseph is going to be so mean to them. He's going to say, you guys aren't getting anything. You threw me in a pit just because I had this cool coat and Dad liked me the best, so you get nothing. So this is it. This is time for Joseph to have his revenge, right? That does not happen. A lot of stuff happens, actually. He tells them to go back and to bring this other brother, and then there's this whole thing with hiding a silver cup in their food, in their bags, and it goes back and forth. But ultimately, what happens is that he provides for his brothers, gives them food, and he tells them who he is. Eventually, it takes a couple turns, but he eventually tells them who he is. So that was the other picture that I drew here at the bottom. So you can see the brothers there at the bottom going to Joseph for the food, but maybe not recognizing it was him at first, but then him telling who they were. And then Joseph says some pretty amazing things, right? He doesn't say, how could you, or anything like that, but he does make some really big statements. One of them, he says, like, don't be so hard on yourself. The things that you guys meant to do for bad, God meant them for good. So even though you had bad intentions, you really wanted to get at me, God had a bigger plan in place. He allowed these things to happen because something bigger was gonna come out of it. And that's another thing that Joseph said too. God sent me before you so that I could save lives. And that's a pretty big deal, right? Because at any point Joseph could have said, well, thanks a lot, God. That's what I get for studying and praying and things like that. I just get thrown in a pit. I get sold into slavery. I didn't deserve any of this. But the Bible doesn't tell us that that was his attitude, that he continued being the same person that he was. And again, God had the biggest plan for him and was able to put him in that place because Joseph followed along and followed suit. And so again, just to recap, thinking of Joseph and his different clothes that he wore throughout his life, the first was coat of many colors. The second one was the kind of rags that he had when he was put in prison. Again, he didn't do anything wrong. He was falsely accused. And then the last one was when he was part of Pharaoh's court, and he had such a big job and was a really important person. And so some things to think about with Joseph's story and kind of things for us to remember is that even though bad stuff happened to Joseph, God was with Joseph the way he is with us all the time. And that's something that's really important to remember, is that we are going to have bad days, and there are going to be things that we plan on happening that don't really happen. But that doesn't mean that God doesn't love us. It doesn't mean he's forgotten us. The Bible tells us, the Bible doesn't say that God is going to give us this perfect life, that we're just going to live carefree and every wish we have is going to happen. There are things that are going to happen to us that are sad, that are uncomfortable, but the Bible tells us that no matter what, God will be with us through every single part of it. So in that case, we're never having to do it alone. So even though Joseph was in that pit by himself, even though when he was in jail, he's with other prisoners, and then even with being in Pharaoh's court, he was also surrounded by people. No matter what, he always had God with him, whether he was with other people or not. He was always part of God's story, and that's for us too. God has a big story in our lives. He has something big planned for each of us, something only reserved for us. And so it's our job to read our Bible, to pray, and to walk through those doors that are open. So it could have been that when Joseph was offered the job to be, head over Pharaoh's, plan to famine 2.0, the plan to make everything cool for when the famine comes, Joseph could have said, I don't have any experience with that. I'm not really that guy. I'm more of a dreams person, so I'll be the dream guy. No, he stepped right up and he followed through. And again, this was such a big job because Joseph did end up saving so many people's lives, not only the lives of people there in Egypt, but also the lives of his brothers, and which will become the tribes of Judah. And so they needed to be saved, I guess, is the biggest takeaway. God was preserving them to be his chosen people later on. So yeah, that's our lesson for today. I hope you guys enjoyed, maybe learned something new about Joseph, or at least were able to remind yourself of what a fantastic Bible character he is, and what wonderful lessons we can learn from his life. Definitely one of my favorites, for sure. So, for your activity today, I thought it might be fun to do a crossword. And so we've done a search a word. We've done like the hidden picture thing. So this one, it has a word bank at the bottom. And of course you have clues that are down and clues that are across. And so just read through. Some of them I did go over. Some of them you might know if you've had a previous lesson or know some information about Joseph. Others you might need maybe some help with. So you can always, again, look in your Bible, Genesis starting in chapter 37 through the end 50, and figure them out. But I feel like you can probably do it with the word bank at the bottom. That's gonna definitely be helpful. So enjoy that. And this week I encourage you guys to talk to your family about the story of Joseph. Maybe ask members of your family what part of Joseph's life that they really enjoy, or that they think is pretty special. There's something about his life, I feel like, for everybody. Lots of good takeaways. And one thing too I also wanted to share with you guys. On Wednesday nights we have an adult Bible class that we do with each other. And this past week, Mr. Eddie Reed, who goes to our church, he made a request for us to pray for police officers. And you guys know Mr. Eddie is a police officer here in the city, and he and other police officers have a really big job. And so it's so important for us to pray for police officers, and especially to pray for them to have wisdom and to have patience, to have discernment, because they have to make quick decisions, and sometimes sometimes they're tough. They're always tough, right? And so we just want to make sure that we're equipping them with our prayers. Police officers deserve our prayers, and so by praying for them to have wisdom, we're not only going to be helping them, but also helping all the rest of us who are subject to police officers. So I wanted to put that out to you guys to put on your prayers this week, with your own prayers or your prayers with your family, but just thinking about police officers and giving them wisdom. So thank you guys. Hope you have a wonderful week. And next week we're up to K. I know that's a shocker. J and then K. Not sure what we're gonna do just yet. I know what we're gonna do for L though. K is a mystery, but we'll figure something out. Have a wonderful week. Enjoy your time outside. Enjoy your time with your family, and hopefully we'll see each other again soon. So bye guys. Have fun.